My name is Jim Hefner. I'm a physical therapist and movement specialist, and you may be wondering why I'm starting this video in a deep squat position. But after I tore my ACL, this was the one position up until about a year ago that I was unable to do. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the exercises, tips, tricks, tools, timeline that it takes to go from ACL injury to getting back to full function, being able to do everything you want to do without any issues. As any good story starts, back in 2013, I was in a bar riding a mechanical bull with my wife, and we got flipped off the mechanical bull and she landed right on my knee. Right away there was pain, swelling, I could barely walk on it. I was doing my residency down in Houston, Texas at the time, and I managed the injury initially myself. A few months later, things are probably at about 70%, and I tried to do some intense water skiing. And as I'm cutting back and forth, I lose my position on the ski, twist in the ski, and then it feels like I'm back to square one. After this, I decided to get some imaging, and this is in 2014 now. I get imaging on my knee, I have an MRI done, and it shows that I have a partial ACL, partial MCL tear. At this point, I have to make the decision, is this something that can be handled conservatively, or do I need to have surgical treatment? When it comes to making the decision whether or not to have surgery, there's several pros and cons that fall into each bucket. One of those being your current lifestyle situation, the current status of your knee, and then future prognosis. With ACL tears, there's two populations of people. There's copers and non-copers. Copers are people who have an ACL tear and they can get their quad strength back, they can manage their swelling, and they have relatively few amounts of instability events in their knee. Non-copers are people who have trouble getting muscle strength back and their knee repeatedly feels like it's going to slide out, like they don't have stability in their knee. So I was falling into this bucket of being a coper, but actually I had positions that felt very much like a non-coper. So I kind of go back and forth on that one. The other consideration for me was I was in my PT residency. I wasn't going back to high-level athletic competition. Now I did want to do high-level activities. I wanted to get back to levels of swimming and water polo, high levels of weight training. I wanted to play different racket sports. I now do jujitsu. So it's a whole combination of requiring strength and stability throughout the entire body. So those are important things for me to consider. Lastly, when you're considering surgery or not, you need to think about the long-term implications on the structural health of your body. If you have surgery, there's this inherent risk of developing arthritis later on in life, and oftentimes they'll take your own quad tendon or they'll take your own hamstring as a means to repair the graft for the ACL. So there's other damage that's being done as you go into surgery. At the same time, there's a risk for arthritis if you don't have surgery. So if you have more instability in your knee because your ACL isn't there, then there's a risk that you're going to have arthritis and with that way too. So the chance of developing arthritis can happen on both ways. And how I took that was my own ability to mitigate the stresses or mitigate the forces that go through my knee are going to dictate the future outcome of how much arthritis happens in my knee. So those are some of the pros and cons that I weighed out when it came to should I have surgery or should I not. Now the final thing that I think is most important is that I never considered surgery. I am such a believer in the healing capacity of the human body and listening to your body and what it says in certain positions, and then how can I self-manage that. So conservative management for me, figuring out how to get my body strong and how to be able to manage all these different positions that the knee needs to go into, figuring out that puzzle was going to be the key for me. So I'm such a believer in conservative management and the body's ability to heal itself that I didn't give much opportunity for surgery to be in the question. So at this point, I've made the decision to go with conservative treatment, physical therapy treatment only to take care of my knee. And within the first 6 to 8 months, I basically get back to 90% function. And that's through strengthening the quad, strengthening the hamstrings, single leg stability and strength exercises, a lot of deep core strengthening, so to help the core position, to help everything else down. And then I've got back into running, doing agility type drills, and that got me to 90%. The rest of the video, I want to talk about the 10%, and that's the stuff that continued to bother me for years afterwards, really, until I figured out the solution of how to take care of it. And that 10% was, I could never sit my hips back towards I could never sit fully back onto my knees. If I stayed in one position for too long of a period of time, my knee would be really achy coming out of that position. The biggest and most significant thing for me was that I couldn't go into a deep squat position with my knee feeling like it was going to slide out of place. So instead of me being able to sit down all the way and do a deep squat and just relax into that position, I either had to hold a squat at about 90 degrees where I stayed in a safe range, or I'd have to shift all my body weight over to my right side to make sure that my knee on the left wouldn't slide out of place. So, and then the rest of the video, I'm going to share with you how I got that last 10% back, and that 10% is what gives me the full confidence in my knee now. At 90%, I could do a lot of stuff, but it was always in the back of my mind of what is the stability of my knee like? Am I safe? Is everything okay? Understanding this last 10% has given me full confidence again in everything that I can do, and that's kind of where the magic is at, in my opinion. So if I could choose one impairment or one issue that I was having with my knee that I feel like led to all the other issues, it was my inability to drop into a full squat position. And what I mean by that is to sit down and just relax in this position. Because for the longest time, I could get to here where I'm still holding tension in my muscles, but the ability to drop down and relax that would shift this left knee where it felt like my lower leg was sliding forward, and it was very unstable. So what I would do is I would drop down, and then I would drop over to this side where all the weight would be on my right, but I couldn't put weight onto my left side. And that inability created apprehension in a lot of different areas. So what I want to talk about is what's necessary for that to occur. And what you need is, to do that position, you need to be able to hold a strong amount of quad tension through a big range of motion, and that needs to be counterbalanced by strength of the hamstrings. So the relationship of the strength of the quad here to the strength of the hamstrings needs to be symmetrical. Also, the other piece is when you go down into a squat, you can see how the knees have to go forward. So being able to bring my knee over my toes and have that feel strong and comfortable was really important. So the combination of being strong here, and being able to drop over my toes, those are three of the key things that I needed to work on. And so in this next part of the video, I'm going to show you the various exercises that I used to get that strength back and the control back in those deep ranges of motion. One of the first exercises is this half kneeling ankle mobility. So when you go down into a squat position, the ankle needs to be able to move through various ranges of motion. And for me, that position would feel unstable. So the way I worked on this was I went into this half kneeling position, and I would drop my knee forward over my toes. So you can see how that sort of compresses the knee. To make sure that the stress isn't going through the knee joint, you've got to feel this down into the foot and ankle. So here, as I go into it, I'm getting a stretch into the Achilles and into the back of the ankle. I'm not loading to the knee. I'm making sure that the ankle is doing that mobility. And so I would work it by going forward. I would work it by dropping off to the inside. I would drop up and over to the outside. But the entire time, I'm playing with the edge of where my ankle can do it versus me taking it in the knee here. So as long as you're working on that and you're opening up through the ankle, that's sending the stress down through here and taking the pressure away from there. The second key exercise was single leg strength, specifically working on single leg squat position. So as I said, getting into that deep squat was where most of my problems were. And so working on that in a slow, controlled fashion, taking myself to that point where it almost felt a little scary or a little apprehensive, and making myself strong in those ranges of motion was a huge change on how stable and how comfortable my knee felt. What that looked like was, so I'm on my left leg using some assistance, dropping down and then pushing back up. Dropping down, pushing back up. That method of strengthening the leg on one leg ensured that my right leg wasn't cheating or taking over. And then it also forced me into that range that felt a little scary or a little uncomfortable. And doing that with assistance is the key. So I'm using some rings from an overhead. You can also do it with a TRX. You can use it by holding onto a door frame. But using assistance where you can slow down the movement, you can really control the movement pattern is key. And the reason that's key is that you need to teach your body that it's okay to go into those ranges of motion. And if your body is too scared or too apprehensive to do it, you're gonna shift into a different movement pattern, and it's never gonna fix that underlying issue. So for a long time, I used assistance, I used some help as I was strengthening and getting the control back on that movement. Once my knee became comfortable to handle those different situations, then I can drop the assistance. But for a while, I needed to train with assistance to be able to fully control and support that movement and feel comfortable doing it. My third exercise or piece of advice is getting comfortable in the knees over toes position. And for me, same with that ankle dorsiflexion stretch that I was doing a minute ago, and with the single leg squat, getting the knee to move forward over the toes was a scary position. It felt like it was a position that I didn't have a lot of stability in. So gradually working into that range and teaching my body that it was okay to do that again. And as I'm doing that teaching process, the muscles are getting stronger and the control in that position is getting stronger. So I'm retraining the muscles in those positions that are helping bring back the stability. It's not that, I don't want you to think that you're putting yourself in a scary position and you can't control it. It's a gradual process of teaching your body how to do that movement again. And that might seem funny or seem foreign because it's essentially rebuilding muscle memory, but that's a huge skill or a capacity that our body has if we gradually do it over time. So working on the knees over toes, what I did was go up against the wall, so I'm using support there, and then I'm leaning forward, letting my heels come up, and then back up. Dropping my toes, my knees forward, and back up. Knees forward, and back up. Each time, taking it to the range that I can control. Dropping the knees forward, heels are coming up, and back up. I'm strengthening the quads through that range as I push back up. Initially, if this feels scary or feels like you can't control it, you have to just go to the range where you can hold the tension in your quad muscle. If you're not able to do that, the stress is going to go through the knee and it's likely going to feel scary or apprehensive. But your ability to hold the tension in the muscle, so as I drop down, holding it through here, not letting it shift into my knees, it's all here. Your ability to do that is going to bring back quad muscle strength in this sort of deep range of motion that we don't do every day. But it was a hugely important thing for getting my ACL or my knee to feel comfortable in those positions again. So far we've covered ankle mobility, single leg strength, working on quad strength with a knees over toes position. The final thing that I think was extremely important was strengthening the hamstrings and the glutes through various bridge positions. So I'm going to show you an elevated bridge position. The way that I actually felt the most benefit for myself was doing this in jiu-jitsu, which requires your hips to move in a whole bunch of different bridge-like situations. But I'm going to show you some variations here. So on your back, knees up on a surface, pull the hips under, raise, hold there, and back down. Hold up again, feel it all in the hamstrings and in the glutes.
back down, there, back down. Now turn your feet out and then do that same thing where you're working the outer hamstrings. Feet out and raise. So you'll feel it distinctly with the feet turned out. It works the outer hamstrings. Now go toes in where the knees come together and then raise up there, and that's going to work more inner hamstring. Now I would do 3 by 5, so 3 sets of 5 reps in each position. There's outer, neutral, middle. And what this does is that the hamstrings are these big reins on the backside, R-E-I-G-N-S, I think, like horse reins on the back of your knee. And strengthening those connections on either side. So they start up at your hips and then they branch out and attach on either side of the knee. By teasing them out and strengthening the inside and outside hamstrings together and then separately, teaches your hamstrings how to control that surface of the knee on the backside. So by having strong hamstrings, you're helping control this rotational shifting capacity that the knee can handle. So doing different bridge type of movements that strengthen the glutes and strengthen the hamstrings was extremely important for getting my knee back to full function. So like I said, I did this through doing a lot of like jujitsu type of bridging and shifting maneuvers, but then I would train extra by doing these bridges here or doing hip thruster type of movements that really targeted the glutes and hamstrings simultaneously. Because I am a physical therapist, I cannot speak enough to the importance of strength and stability in the human body and also having mobility, which is strength through a range of motion. So in addition to those 4 exercises that I just covered, being generally strong, especially strong through your core, your deep core muscles, was so foundational for me to get back to recovery, to get back to full function. And then also, I think a lot about how chains of muscles work together. So when I'm doing a lunge, being able to work the muscles all the way from my core down through my feet. Or when I do a squat, really being able to engage the quads, but also the glutes and the hamstrings. So being able to use these whole chains of muscles was extremely important. The other piece that I want to say is what I thought was so crucial to my success, but this goes for speaking for all injuries, is that people tend to just bucket themselves as either having pain or not having pain. But what was crucial for me is that I wasn't having pain at all times. I was having pain with certain positions. So when I would go into a full squat position, or when I would sit back onto my heels, or if I would be in one position for a long time, those were the positions that would hurt. The key to getting out of those pains then is to play around with the variables around those positions. So for me, with that squat, it was identifying that the moment that I would lose muscle tension in my knee, or I wouldn't be able to hold a position anymore, was the onset of that feeling of instability. There's usually a timing piece or a pattern piece around your symptoms. And if you can figure out how to tweak the variables, or what I call putting the pieces together on the puzzle, that's going to be the secret or the trick to figuring out your own problem. That can be complicated because it takes a lot of focused awareness and attention and intention behind the prescription of your exercises. But when you can start to identify that, hey, when I squat this way, it doesn't hurt, but when I squat that way, it does hurt. And distinguishing those, well, what does it take for me to go from not painful, or from the painful one to not having pain? If I use some assistance, is that helpful? If I slow down the movement, is that a good way to bring more muscle memory and awareness to a pattern? Figuring out those specifics of my deficits that I was having was the key to taking me from feeling unstable and weak in certain positions to getting back to full function. If you would ask me today, what's the percentage status of how my left knee is doing, I would say somewhere between 95 and 100, 99 and 100%. Now I no longer have any instability in my knee, but what's funny is that I shifted away from that pain or instability for so long that there's this inkling or this reminder deep in my brain that it used to be that way. So I can't, it's like hard to decipher whether or not it feels unstable or if it's actually just the old pattern. And it doesn't restrict me in any sport or any activity, and it feels completely fine, but there's this deep ingrained part of what it used to be like that my brain is still holding on to just a sliver of that. And I'm confident that the more I continue to work it and the more that those patterns get stronger, that sensation I foresee in the next 6 months to a year, I'll kind of laugh at I'll forget was it my left knee or my right knee. And to me, that is the sign of 100% healing from an injury, is where you almost have to question yourself which knee used to be the problem. Other tips and takeaways is that you have to believe that your body can heal and that your body can get better. I remember thinking, and this goes more into the psychology or philosophy around healing, but for a long time I used to say that it was my bad knee, and then I shifted the focus to saying that it's my other strong knee. And I know that sounds silly, but you need to instill the mindset that your body is strong and healthy, and that's going to create the mindset of you being able to use that knee more. So that was a huge part of getting back to full function. Additionally, that will allow you to use that knee to the same degree. So instead of offloading it, you're going to start putting more impetus or more reliability on your knee. And so if you call it bad or injured, you're going to treat it like a bad or injured area. If you instill strength, a strong mindset into that area, then it's going to you're going to be a lot stronger because you have more confidence in it. And I know that's a tricky thing, because that for a while, it's shifting the narrative around the capacity that your own body has. But what was forever rewarding is that I was 100% believer in conservative management, and that belief then kept me going along the way, as you know, because it is kind of a roller coaster of ups and downs, and being able to have that in the back of my mind that I'm going to get better, that conservative management or physical therapy, strengthening, mobility work, exercises are going to be the key. Having that at the backbone of my mindset was so crucial in getting me back to full function. So I don't know if this works for everybody, but it certainly worked for me. And that's what I want the takeaway to be, is that I figured out strategies and solutions that worked for my body, and I used principles of pain science and biomechanics and strength and conditioning and sport injury rehab, all of those things in my own personal journey. And I feel like if you take that slow, conservative, very mindful, very intentional approach, then you can have a similar outcome as well.